audio's there, and then let me just, oops, desktop audio. Okay. All right, I think it should be good with the audio.
Okay. Oh, I see myself. I see you.
Oh gosh, it's been
So
so
yeah,
long since we've done a live.
we can tell a. Just kidding.
I just have to remember how all the buttons and everything work. Setting it all up on my end.
Yay. Well, we're live now, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we'll see if anybody joins us while we're live, and then we'll see if we can get any questions in from the audience. But we could probably begin our conversation, right?
Yeah, for sure. I know I posted on social media a couple days ago, a little while ago, a couple days ago, some of the topics we were going to be talking about. So I can probably just put those into the chat. Um,
Okay. Do you want me to read them while you do that?
yeah, so the first question is going in the chat now, and feel free to answer in the comments. We'll get to them um, later on as the time syncs up.
Okay, well, yat Shea Adrian Lerma Inishia, na kaidana initially, Nash Ajataba Hampashichin, Tachini Dashnella, Gozalfana Dashache. I was born and raised on the Navajo Nation, and I am one of the co hosts for Navajo Tea Time. This is our first YouTube live in 2024. It is January 31st. I'm here with Kelsey, and we have two questions and one topic of discussion. Kelsey's posting the questions in the chat. If you want to respond, answer the question yourself, please do so. And then we'll take questions as they come in. So the first question is, how can we increase American Indian slash Native American slash Indigenous representation at the graduate school and professional levels? Um, this is a question um, that we think is not only interesting but applicable to today's times. So, do you want to answer first, Kelsey, or do you want me to?
um, you can talk more about it on your end, and I can just give my responses to some of the
Okay.
topics that you have.
Okay, so I'll just provide a little bit of context. So, at Navajo Tea Time, we often talk about issues that directly affect, the Navajo Nation, Native people in America in contemporary times. And so a lot of the topics that have come up are related to, things that we all face, education being one of them. And it's been at the top of my mind because, I do work in the field of education, higher education. I previously worked for a tribal college and now I work for a university. And, it's so wonderful to see so many Native undergraduates. And I was thinking, how can we make a way for more decision makers, more advocates to act in the interests of their people to protect, land, water, our rights, our citizens, and how can we increase more natives moving on to the graduate level and moving into professional levels of their education, meaning like, EDD, Juris Doctorates, PhDs, because that's like a whole other level of academia, right? And as we know, it's um it's not easy to get to that level, and there are a lot of people who've made inroads, so many from the Navajo Nation, but I think we could definitely increase those numbers. And so I think, like, I guess the question I had was like, what kind of environment do we have to create to ensure that they graduate with degrees and that they have opportunities for employment? Um, and then Another question related to this that I put in our notes is what does the culture, community, and family value when it comes to
Oh,
education in the
that was
workforce?
my question.
Oh, I was wondering why. So, what I saw before was the unfinished sentence. So, anyways, never mind. I guess that was Kelsey's. So, go ahead, weigh in.
I feel like a lot of the topics, or some of the stuff that goes with like having a master's or a PhD or an MBA and all those higher level
Hmm.
graduates is like um, I feel like sometimes the community, well, I guess like the question I had was like, what does the culture, community, and family value when it comes to education and the workforce? So, like on my example for just like my family and everyone, my grandma, she has like a very rigid traditional view of what work is, and
Hmm.
especially for like males. So if the
Hmm.
male isn't doing something with his hands, isn't a mechanic or um, construction or going to like a 9 to 5 or going somewhere for work and doing
Hmm.
hard manual labor, then she doesn't consider it work in her mind. You know, there's a weird barrier for that. And then, so with my sentence of like, he keeps graduating, when's he going to work? It's in response to one of my relatives where he got done with high school early, got his GED, and he's just been in different certificate and college programs doing a lot of online for different schools, and he graduates them with like kind of shorter form degrees. But now he's getting into like the 4 year degrees and stuff, and he's just been consistently going to school. And he's had a couple of graduations like every 6 months from different programs. And so that was kind of like my grandma's response was like, he just keeps graduating. When's he gonna go to work? And so that's
Oh,
what
I
I
see.
was thinking of when you said, why don't we have more doctorates and masters and everything? And that was just kind of the comment that came to mind is like sometimes the family doesn't, or like even the community or the culture doesn't value just higher learning opposed to like just getting straight to work and making money right after you graduate with your 4 year degree or your 2 year degree.
Hmm. Yeah, so I apologize for reading through the notes so carelessly and taking that comment that you wrote. But so I'm sorry for that, Kelsey. So what um I think in response to what you're saying, I think it should be stated that, the many families have different values, right, for how they raise their kids and what the expectation is for career and for education. And there's nothing wrong with that path. I think it's good to have many credentials, but that saying how they say the quote's escaping me, but it's like it's basically saying that, like, how to do many things, but you're really a master of nothing. Do you remember that quote? Like,
Was
something of many, master of none.
jack of all trades, master of none?
Jack of all trades, yeah, master of it. That's what it was. Yeah, so that's what it was like bringing to mind. It was like, okay, well, it's great, but still, being a jack of all trades is awesome. You know what I mean? It's good to be able to know how to do many things and be credentialed to do many things. So you have multiple options, right? And I think people are going to criticize you no matter what you do. I think there are a lot of people in higher education who I've met and spoke to recently in the past 6 months who've told me that it's been really challenging getting buy-in from their families and getting buy-in from their community so that inroads can be made for them to go home and work and build a life back on their homeland. And it's not easy. And so I think, like, no matter what you do, you're going to get a little bit of criticism where people are going to question your choices. Um, And I think that, like, personally, I feel like we should do better. You know what I mean? All of us should do better to encourage each other and to support one another and to build this environment that allows for more people to pursue higher education if that's what they want to do, whether it's to fund them, to prepare them early, to work with our leadership to make sure we have necessary, like, have their basic needs met when they come home, like housing, right, a job that has competitive pay, a really great insurance, incentives, like things like that to kind of make it a desirable thing to do. um so I don't know, what do you think about that?
I think there's definitely like layers on coming back home with an education and a degree that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
fit like two specific careers, which is healthcare and education.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those two career paths are the only one where you can have housing, because you can apply for
Mm-hmm.
hospital housing or you can apply for school housing, um,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the only ones that actually have, I feel like, have incentives. And I think back when I was in school, 2010, 2013 time era, the only summer scholarships that were
Mm-hmm.
available were for people who were either going into healthcare or going into education. So if you wanted to go to school during the summer and get some
Mm-hmm.
summer classes taken, you had the only way the Navajo Nation would provide a scholarship to you was if you were in those two programs.
Mm.
And
So that says a lot about the value system of I guess, the Navajo Nation, right? We do care about education and we do care about healthcare because we've made it possible so that there is housing to bring people back in those fields, and there are incentives to pursue education, through high school, during the summer, and then in college.
yeah, but I feel like that's where they stop.
Mm-hmm.
There's no incentives. Like it's getting slower, and it's like a little bit by bit where people are recognizing small businesses within the community that are already there.
Well,
And
I think there's this big push. There's been this big push over the past, 8 years to really put a spotlight on small business development and entrepreneurship. And I think that without that big push, it wouldn't really be a priority for people to start, putting their money towards small businesses or buying from small businesses, buying native, right? Buying local.
mm,
All of that language really came about over the past 8 to 10 years. And so I think that making it more of a common practice is important, and taking it beyond just the flea market, right? Taking it beyond roadside vendors and really taking it into like people who are working toward brick and mortars, people that are starting, businesses and building enterprises, and supporting them and the work that they're doing, because that's really difficult to do. So I think that's like one of the value shifts that maybe we've seen in our lifetime, where there are more options now for people that want to do something other than go into education or go into the healthcare field. Because, like, would you agree?
yeah, for sure. It's
Mm-hmm.
there. There's a lot of talk of being more supportive with
Mm-hmm.
those entrepreneurs, and I think, yeah, within this past year or two, there's been more show than tell. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
Working with Change Labs and then them working directly with the Navajo Nation government, they've got a couple of programs approved and running through to definitely help more small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to see that shift and that change. But there's still like that underlying systemic barrier, I guess, of like,
Why do you think that is?
um, well, like the barrier was like housing,
Mm-hmm.
homes, and that is a giant laundry list of so many things that need to change in so many different departments. Um, for sure. I think
So I think, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I had one more comment for like the overall, like some of the questions you were asking about like decision makers and more advocates coming back to the
Mm-hmm.
reservation. And I feel like what I've noticed and what I've witnessed, it's a lot more difficult to come back with new ideas, modern or urban ideas, um, and trying to implement them into your community. There's
Mm-hmm.
people who push back, trying to maintain the status quo of what they've been doing, what's going on, like how the government's run, how processes happen, just because it's always been done that way. So they want to keep doing it that way. And
Mm-hmm.
then with me working in my own community, I've noticed some really intense responses to working with like outside companies or corporations where I would like without any type of psychological degree or anything, I would call it a trauma response to
Hmm.
trying to trust the government or the community or the administration to do what's right for the community just because for so many years things have gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just like that initial response of like this is wrong or like something's gonna happen, I can't trust them, and then it's just an
Mm-hmm.
overblown reaction.
No, I think that actually that's a great observation that you're bringing to this, because I think that is also one of the reasons why we don't have that many people pursuing, graduate and professional level degrees, because they there really has been a tenuous relationship between the tribes and institutions of higher education, and for a long time there were barriers in place that kept us out of these, halls of knowledge. And now those doors are opening, thanks to, many of our grandparents who fought that fight and made those changes, and really advocated for us, like our generations that were following. But I think that there's still that mistrust that you're talking about, and there's still that internal conflict that a lot of people feel about, is this education, this Western education, really is it going to change me? Is it going to turn me into someone who I'm not? Is it going to make me stronger, or is it going to weaken me? Is it going to pull me away from who I am and as a native person, right? And I think that sometimes after going 4 years, it's like, okay, well, I did that. Now I'm going to do something else, and I think there is a lot of value in work and using your hands and pulling in a regular paycheck. And I see that. I see it all the time. People are very proud. Like, parents are really proud of their children who are working. That's like the first thing they share, right? Oh, my son is doing this, or oh, my daughter's doing this. And they're really proud of them. And, and it could be anything, you know what I mean? It's just like, just so long as they're able to feed themselves and have a roof over their heads and take care of their families, that's really like the value system. And I don't think it's very complex. And I think what it is, though, is like there is definitely this we have these trauma responses. And I guess like what I hope for every day is that we can address those and encourage more people to pursue. I like the reason why I think I wanted to talk about education is because I think more representation in graduate schools and more representations at the professional level will allow us to be at the seat of in these like rooms where big decisions are being made for us. Oftentimes we talk about how stressed out and we are about the way things are run. The problem is, you know, there aren't that many people who are in a position to actually change those things. They either don't have the qualifications, or they're being held back, you know what I mean, or out there, they're being kept out, like shut out of these rooms where these decisions are being made, or they lack the experience or training to rewrite policy, right? And I think we have a handful of those people, but they're so skilled, talented. they're getting scooped up by other companies and organizations off the reservation that are saying, we're going to pay you well to do this. Do what you do for us. You know what I mean? And so I think that's how a lot of our brightest, like our best and brightest, kind of get scooped up, you know, to do other things for people that are not their own, like not their own, like a part of their own tribe, I guess. And so, or their own community. So, that's, I guess that's something that's really been on my mind. And I just, like, I always feel like it's my responsibility to encourage people who are maybe like feeling that dilemma, you know, like do I go to graduate school or do I just start working? Like when I was mentoring students, or I would have students working for me, um, when they were like undergrad interns, that was something that came up all the time. And I had this one student who was like, um, she had just got her degree, and she was my intern her senior year. She just got her degree. When she was graduating with her bachelor's degree, though, she was pregnant. She was like, I wanted to tell you I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh my goodness, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. But she was like, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know if I should go to graduate school or if I should just start working. And she was like, I'm kind of thinking of just working and putting it off later because it might be too much for me. And one of my colleagues was there with me, and she's, you know, she has her JD. And she told the student who just graduated, she said, I would highly suggest you go to graduate school, because when your child is an infant and very young, they sleep most of the time. You know what I mean? They sleep a lot, they don't require a lot. You know what I mean? And that can get you through the first 2 years where, you know, and you can really like mold your life, you know what I mean? So you can do both well. And I think that student, though, she was like, I think she kind of felt intimidated, though, like it was going to be too much. And so she ended up choosing to go to work. And I know this because she asked me to write her a letter of recommendation. And so I did. And I just encouraged her. I said, you know, when you're ready to go back, let me know, and I'll help you, you know, get you into graduate school. She's like, okay. And I think so many people are faced with that dilemma, you know, because when you have a life that depends on you, you know you have to work, right? Like you know your child's going to be, you feel that your child's going to be better off so long as you have the money to buy everything that baby needs. And so I think that was one of the deciding factors.
Yeah, it's and I guess me just recently having a baby, it's different every time with children, depending on how you
Mm-hmm.
react after pregnancy. You can't really know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's definitely a personal choice, and it's difficult for each person.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
Brady's on. He said he's sorry he's late. That's okay. Thanks for being here. And he got an internship. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I don't know what's up with
Congratulations.
my YouTube studio thing. It's not showing the comments I wanted to post. But I'm on my Happy Accidents account on the side over here. That's why I keep looking down for comments. But congratulations. He says he trusts the government. They do so much for us. Um, I think it's about him talking about getting a degree where he got a little
Mm-hmm.
nose in the air complex. Um, which happens, some I get that way with my older brother because he went through his military training and he tried to go back to college, but he's like, I can't do this. There's a girl sitting in the corner knitting while listening, and I find that disrespectful. And I don't understand these kids nowadays. So he didn't finish his degree. So I always make fun of him. It's like, well, you know what, Charles? I went to college. Um, so that's the only time I get snooty about my degree is with my older brother.
Nose in the air complex. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm proud of you, Brady. Go to graduate school. So just for, I don't know if you were here when we first started the conversation, but we were answering the question, how can we increase American Indian, Native American, Indigenous representation at the graduate school and professional levels. And we started talking about some of the challenges that a lot of our community members face. And I think we should just kind of circle back really quick and just maybe you and I can, answer that question, even if it's just with one suggestion. Like, how can we increase representation? How do
Um,
you think we can, Kelsey?
how can we increase representation? I think
Mm-hmm.
mm, it definitely has to come from like the home. There has to be a
Yeah.
place for them to see it in their
Mm-hmm.
community. So, in order to increase representation, we have to bring it back home and have like the children interacting with people with graduate degrees. So
Mm-hmm.
that the younger generation can grow up thinking, knowing that that's an option,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that it's possible and it's not as difficult as all the media makes it out to be. I'm sure it's like you have to do a lot of hard work, but like I don't know, watching TV shows and stuff, they make it sound like getting a master's or a doctorate is like the hardest thing in the world, and you should just go to work. You know?
Mm-hmm. You know what's really hard? Trying to pursue a graduate degree and working at the same time. That is really freaking hard, and a lot of people do that too because like I was saying before, like economically it makes more sense. You have to be bringing in money to support your family, but you also might have this desire to get a degree, and then you end up in a situation like that, like me. It's really
I feel like
tough.
also like the institutions need to reward those degrees because my mom, she had a master's in teaching, or she
Mm-hmm.
has a master's in teaching, but she was still paid as if she only had a bachelor's for like 4 or 5 years. She never got that raise that she was supposed to be getting with the more education. um, so that has to be that, like, you want people with higher degrees, you also need to reward those people with those degrees accordingly.
Yeah, pay them well. I agree. I think I really like your comment about bringing it back to the home. I think I do agree that I think that's the key to increasing more representation because in our homes, we have to instill this love of learning. You know what I mean? Instill that value that, increasing your knowledge is so important. And I think that's true because, it reminds me of this story that I was told about Yahuaca. And she was so beloved to our people. She was so cared for and protected, and people adored her because she had this love of knowledge. And when she was born, she was brought up to know everything about how the world worked. She learned herbology, she learned about astronomy, she learned about science, she learned about, you know, geography. She learned everything there is to know, the different species of the animals, how to like source and make medicine, how to weave, how to create her own clothing, how to care for herself, physical activity, warfare, you know, prayer, spirituality, everything, philosophy, and everyone who encountered her, they taught her. They shared with her their knowledge and she absorbed it. And she had a good attitude about it. She wasn't, the way they describe her is like she wasn't someone who shied away from the knowledge or who felt like it was too much responsibility or too much information or she was bored. She was open to learning. She cared about learning more, and then she used that knowledge to take care of herself and the people around her and her children. And that's who we're supposed to be modeling ourselves after, right? That's who we as Danette are supposed to be, like aspiring to be like her, to be like that. And I think that's gotten kind of lost along the way. And I kind of think that maybe there are parents out there who aren't instilling that love of learning and who aren't sharing all, like everything that they have in their brain. They might not be passing it on to their kids, or there might be other things that are getting in the way, or there might be people who are choosing to let other things and other people raise their kids. You know, I think it's really easy to give your kid an iPad as opposed to sitting down and reading with them or showing them how to do something, right? And I think it goes back to parenting. I think it goes back to how we raise our kids. I think it's about the values we instill in them so that our children become like Yothkaistan, you know, where they have this desire to learn more and use that knowledge in a meaningful way so that their life counts for something. And I think that's a really big thought. It's a big way of looking at our existence, but it's also an instruction book, right? That's how we were taught. And so I think it's an alignment, you know. I think that's a cultural value that aligns directly with what I'm talking about, you know, creating more decision makers, more advocates, more protectors, more leaders. Um, and so, yeah,
For
I
sure.
really like that you brought that up. Yeah, that was a really great angle that I agree with 100%.
I think
So shall we move to question two?
one moment. I just have
Oh,
to
go
say,
ahead.
like, I think it also we need to move out of like the survival mindset and transition
Mm-hmm.
into like the thriving mindset, because that's what a lot of people are at this moment. Like, they're just trying to survive from one day to the next, from the next week, from the paycheck to paycheck, and it's just making sure there's something on the table. The kid kind of went to school on time. You know, there's definitely different
Mm-hmm.
types of trauma responses and mindsets that we need to be able to grow from and move out of as a community, as a tribe, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
there's different ways to do that, but I just thought that was also one thing of like being able to have the ability to get out of the survivor mindset is also key.
And it's crazy too, because it's like easy to say that, but it's so hard to do, right? And I think even if you were to choose one person to focus your attention on, it could be like maybe a niece or a nephew, or maybe it's one of your own children. I think it's easier to have influence on your immediate family, like if it's your children, because you have authority in that relationship. It's really hard to try to get people who are older than you to listen to you, like maybe your parents or your aunts and uncles. I think it's really hard to get other people's children to also take guidance sometimes. And I know this from personal experience. Like, you have such a heart for them and you want to do anything and everything you can to help them, but the things that they carry, if they're still in survival mode, it's so hard to get out of that. And it takes time and it takes maturity and it takes a lot of love and a lot of resources. And I think if each one of us were to commit to putting that time, effort, and energy and love into people around us, even if it's just one person, I think that could make a big difference. And so, I mean, I know that's like a big responsibility, but I think that's also something that like I would encourage our listeners to consider, you know, because you could be changing a life, you know, like drastically, you know, and it would I think that's why that saying is like it takes a tribe or it takes a village to raise a person, right? And I think that's the same way too, is like it takes a lot of people to raise up a child to an adult and then take that adult into old age, you know. And I think so many of us don't have the some of us don't make it to old age, and it sucks, you know. And so like for those that are still here, I think there's still time.
Okay, I'm just
I
gonna read
think
off
we
some of
can
the
still try.
comments that came in after. Um, Brady said that's exactly what he's trying to do, represent the Native Americans on the federal level, which is what we definitely need.
Mm-hmm.
Phil Daw said the cell phone problem, and then we need our culture and our language back. And then Brady also said having more flexibility with admissions criteria, because it's all just done off
Mm-hmm.
of like ACTs or SATs, which there's a whole group of people who just don't test well, and doesn't
Yeah.
mean they're not smart. They're just not good at filling in bubbles. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then Cat Bob said she had or they had to drop out of the college to support their mom and their dad and their brother financially, and you know, help with
Mm-hmm.
grandma. And there's definitely those situations that come up, and it's really hard. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the importance of like having more people at a graduate and professional level isn't that everyone needs to. It's just, if you're capable and you have a desire to do more educational stuff, and it should be an option, like being a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, or um, a teacher, or any of the
Mm-hmm.
other careers, like a mechanic, I think is a really big one, or even a welder, how those are like some of the staples of what I see Navajo people specifically going into work for. If, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
no, why don't you be a doctor and a professor, or get an MBA, and, just have it being an option, would
Mm-hmm.
be beneficial to a lot of people. Just knowing the variety of jobs and choices out there helps the community as a whole.
Yeah, and I think just knowing that it's always an option. Like you can always decide to change things and pursue something that you've always wanted to do. Like that's what I did. My story is that I did not do well in high school and I graduated pretty low in my class because I didn't really care about it. I used to just read in class all day and not really pay attention. But I was able to score really high my senior year because I wanted to graduate. And so I made a deal. It was kind of like an academic contract. I had to ace all my classes in order to graduate. And so I did because I worked really hard. I graduated. I still didn't graduate like top of my class though because it was such a long, it was delayed, right? It was a delayed effort. And then I wanted to go to art school, but my family didn't really support it because they were like, they didn't want me to be a starving artist. And I love art. I always wanted to make it for a living, to be involved in that whole art culture. And my parents were like, no, you need to be like, you need to do something else, something that is going to make you money. And they really wanted me to go in the health field. But I know myself, I'm not good with like sickness. I'm not good with blood. I would never want to touch a cadaver. And so I knew that wasn't, and I throw up easy. Like I get sick. I just don't have the stomach for it. So I knew that wasn't for me. I also, there's other things that I'm averse to. And so I knew that wasn't the field for me. So my mom told me there was a college I wanted to go to, but it was back east. And my mom said no. So we made an agreement and I went to a community college. And I didn't like it and I dropped out. And it took me a long time to go back to college. It took 9/11. It took a war to break out. It took seeing a lot of my friends and family in Iraq, just living through that whole thing. And I got to the point where I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just, I was in a hole. I was depressed, and so I went back to school. I ended up getting into the University of Arizona, and I had an amazing time there. But then there was a death in the family. And so I had to drop out to take care of my family member who had just lost their partner and to take care of my nephew. And then there was an accident. Someone really close to me got into a really, really bad situation. And they were like, it was like a 50-50% of chance of living. You know what I mean? It was a violent type of thing. And so these are the kinds of experiences that you have, I think, when you come from a native community. There's violence, there's sickness, there's accidents, things happen that are really, really bad sometimes, and you have to live through them. And if you have to live through them, sometimes you have to make really big choices that are going to go against your best interests, like dropping out of a great university that you love and you're thriving at. And I had to do that. And my dad told me, don't do it. And I said, I have to. Like, I have to take care of these people. And so I did. And I ended up learning how to be a pipe fitter. And I did that trade for a number of years. And so now I have this skill that I can fall back on no matter what happens. But it was still like not what I wanted to do, and it really went against my value system because at heart, I'm an environmentalist. I care about the earth, and working at refineries was not good, like it was toxic for me, not just for like my immediate surrounding, but like from my spirit. So I decided to go back to school. And it took a long time. It took all these years and all these experiences for me to finally find my way back. And then I did. And I finally graduated and I got my first degree. And that's why I always say, like, it's never too late to decide to change things. You know, if you really want to do something, you feel like it's a good fit, you decide that, like, you know, I'm going to be good at this. I have good ideas. I'm smart. I can solve problems. I have what it takes. When you get to that point in your life, I always say just go after it. You know, it doesn't matter what anyone says. You'll find a way, you know, like pray about it, think about it, plan around it, make it happen. And it's never too late. And all of the, like, not everyone goes like on that straight road, you know, from high school to college to whatever. Like, you know, many of us end up getting married, having children, taking care of our elderly parents, like, or livestock or fields. Like, I have a lot of friends that do that too. But the truth is, it's your path, it's your journey. And I just want to encourage people, you know, that it's all worth it. You know, it's going to make you better at everything you do. All these lived experiences, they color how you think and they color how you plan and how you strategize. And that in itself is really powerful. So yeah, that's just like my personal story. I hope it's helpful to somebody.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. So we're coming. I think we're probably gonna go over time, but the next
Okay.
question is, would you say the next topic is would more American Indian, Native American Indigenous medical doctors result in better health care for tribal people slash communities? And for me, I had a very concise answer. So I'll just say my
Mm-hmm.
piece first, and then we'll see. I said I think for there to be better health care for Native people, the whole healthcare system in the USA needs to change. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter how many nurses, doctors, pharmacists, technicians, or board members that are Native if the whole system that they're working in is flawed. And I feel like the healthcare is very for profit with private insurance companies and everything. So that just makes healthcare like a commodity instead of a necessity. And I feel like that system needs to change for it to be better for everyone or anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. I'm one of those people that voted for universal health care because I think everybody should have that privilege, you know what I mean? And it's unfortunate that so many people that's prohibitive, you know, and they end up getting sick. They don't have that preventative care because it's too expensive. And it's really sad and messed up. I really think our country should do better. Um But like to answer the question, like in regard to healthcare in the Navajo Nation, I do believe that the more medical doctors we have in the field that are native will be able to provide better, more customized services to native people. And I think there would be like only because I've seen that happen. I've seen how like my sister-in-law is a surgeon and one of my good friends, she's a general surgeon out in New Mexico, in northern Navajo. And these women are so they put so much care into their work and they put so much care into into their patients, you know, the way their bedside manner, the way they want to be precise, they want to be exact, they don't want to make any mistakes, you know. And I've seen people that they really do have a heart, you know, for what like for their people, and they want to provide them the kind of care that they know they deserve, to be able to speak to them in a way that they would speak to a relative, you know, and I think we deserve that. And you know, there's people like me who are not fit to be a doctor, a medical doctor, but I think there's others. Like I went to school with a lot of people that I think would have made great doctors. And it's not just a matter of being intelligent, it's a matter of being dedicated, it's a matter of being precise, it's a matter of being, you know, meticulous in how you do things. And I've seen a lot of people do that. And they could be auto mechanics, you know what I mean, just because they didn't have access to go to medical school because it's expensive and it's hard to get into. But I think truly, truly believe that, you know, if we had more more doctors in the field of healthcare on the Navajo Nation, I think our healthcare would be improved dramatically. Just because they understand what is required and they're invested in the community, because it's not just a bunch of strangers, it's their relatives, it's their family, you know. And so I think that that would drastically change how things are. Um, and you know, a couple things that were listed in our notes were some of the existing challenges that exist, the obvious challenges and the less obvious challenges. But like housing, of course, is a huge challenge. Competitive pay is a challenge. Incentives to return and remain in their communities are challenging. And even though there are some housing options for doctors, a lot of those houses are already filled. You know what I mean? Like, we need more housing all across the Navajo Nation. We know that. We need competitive pay for everybody, including our leadership and including people who work in government, because right now they're getting paid. Like, we voted a couple years ago, right, to increase the pay of our leaders, and the Navajo people decided to keep it as is. And so our Navajo Nation president, I think, makes like 40K a year. That's insane. He runs the Navajo Nation. And like, the we didn't vote to increase his pay. It's crazy. I'm like, really? Like, that is nuts. It really is a sacrifice for people to really pursue. Like, in order to get elected, we all know you have to be the best and the brightest, right? You get scrutinized so much when you're running for office, and you have to be almost perfect in order to get elected by the majority. And so it's interesting because we want these perfect people, but we don't want to compensate them properly or fairly. And I think that's kind of crazy. And I think we should do better, people. So if that legislation ever comes up again, I hope our people will vote to increase the rate of pay, because we need to incentivize more of our talent coming home, because it's not easy coming home. It's so much easier to leave. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be like that.
And definitely just like the minimum wage. I think the minimum wage for Navajo Nation is still like 7.25 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like when like even here in Cameron, they're trying to fill office positions and everything. It's more it's more beneficial to drive an hour into Flagstaff and get work at like Burger King or one of the fast food joints, because working at the chapter house, or yeah, at the chapter house, is less money. Even though you're not driving as far or spending money on food and gas, you still get paid more in
Mm-hmm.
Flagstaff than you would just, you know, working within the community.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I've always had to take, like, for me personally, I went home because I wanted to be there and I wanted to raise my kids at home, and I wanted them to have that strong connection to community and family. But it did mean taking a drastic cut in pay. And that's a sacrifice a lot of people make, and for some people are fortunate to be able to do that, and other people's they're just not. Like, it's crazy because like in Tuba City they'll be advertising for people to come on, and like the rate of pay is like $10 an hour, and I'm like, is that all? That's crazy. Like, we need to pay people more. Like, it's 2024, we shouldn't be paying people like it's the 90s. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I get really frustrated about that, and I know there's reasons why it is, and I know that like there's things that taxes will have to be increased probably, and there's a lot of things that have to be moved around and shifted. But I just feel like there's always time for change in the future, and I think like we really need to work together to make those changes. I know it's possible. I know it is, but it's gonna like require the consent of the people to say, you know what, we deserve better. We need to vote like we deserve better. We need to vote like we care enough about future generations. Like, really start using that old way of thinking, like 7 generations ahead of us. What do we have to do today to prepare for that big change in the future? Because if we don't do anything today, guess what? Everything, like, things aren't going to change and it's not going to get better. So, anyways, um, that's all I have for that. I don't want to get all upset. Ew.
There's just a lot. That's
Hmm. Okay, let's shift the conversation to our topic of discussion. Actually, before we do that, do you want to have any comments come in that we should look at before we move
Um,
on to the topic of discussion, which is a little more lighthearted?
I think the last few ones, Brady was also talking about, that's something he definitely would like upon graduating is like job security on the
Mm-hmm.
reservation.
Yeah.
Going to work, going to get your education, and then knowing there's a job waiting for you back home is something I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people would like to know when they spend thousands and
Yeah.
thousands of dollars on a degree. And then,
The way to do it is you have to pray about it, and you have to like also go out and make those connections with people ahead of time. I know it's possible. I was able to do that. I graduated on Friday and I started my new job on Monday. And so I know that it can be done. You just have to really do the legwork ahead of time. This was like a 6 month thing. Like it was conversations, it was negotiations, like you have to advocate for yourself. You can't wait until the day of your, like after you graduate to look for a job. You should be looking for a job well before then. And you should also be doing internships too, leading up to it. So you're on the right path, Brady. So just keep it up, make those network connections. And honestly, and I always tell people this, don't take the first offer. You're going to get an offer for pay. You need to always advocate for yourself and say, no, I demand more. Don't take the first offer, negotiate for more. The truth is, they usually have a scale. Like there's a scale. If they're not paying you max already, which they're not going to if you're entry level, there's still a room for you to negotiate for more money. Everybody should be negotiating for more money, and everybody should be asking for a raise every 6 months to a year. I tell everybody that. It's so important. And I mean, if you don't ask, it's never going to happen. And you could ask, and you can request for um, to be evaluated, and that's going to go in your record. And you just got to do well. Like, if you know what you're doing, you're good at your job, you're smart, do that. You know what I mean? And then, and just advocate for yourself, demand more. That's the only way you're going to move up. So, I'm rooting for you, Brady, and everyone else who might be on this path. Remember, you're worth it.
right, okay. And then, so that was also said something about a holistic approach for
Mm-hmm.
institutions. They should adopt a holistic approach. I think in regards
I
to
agree.
like admissions and maybe learning. um,
Well, a lot of universities are doing that, and a lot of organizations are also shifting how they take care of their employees. So you have the power to seek out an institution that's going to be a good fit for you. And if a holistic approach is what you care about, don't settle for less. You don't, like, no one has to settle for less. You can always seek out a better option. So, unless you're like in dire need, but don't get to that point. Like I said, save your money, look for jobs early, do your internships, be smart about it. And then I always tell people don't drink because you'll save a lot of money. You can do your job better if you're not hungover, I promise. But that's just me being on my soapbox, which I always end up on, huh, Kelsey?
it's
I'm
why
always
I
on my
asked you to be
soapbox.
my
Oh my
host.
gosh. I'm like, don't do this and do this instead. I'm sorry. I know I'm bossy. I like always turn into like, I go into like Sonny mode and I'm just like, anyways, okay, my apologies. Let's shift to something else.
So a more lighthearted discussion and topic. It's the end of the first month of the new year, and there's like this new year, new me that always comes up. I think after 2020, there's been like a lot of like, don't you dare say new year, no me, or this is gonna be my year. You're gonna jinx all of us. There's always all of those. Um, so Adrienne has some interesting information she looked up.
Oh yeah. Okay, so this section is New Year, New Me, love it, hate it, or abstain from it. So the information I found out on the internet, so according to the internet, historically, the first recorded people to set New Year's pledges, later to be known as resolutions, are the ancient Babylonians. about 4,000 years ago. The Babylonians are also the first civilization to hold recorded celebrations in honor of the new year. So that was cool. And do you want to comment on that, Kel- Kelsey?
Oh yeah. So I like I don't know if we want to just go like through different like New Year stuff. The Navajo perspective, it says like the winter season is for pause, the time, and reflection. And I just put in like also New Year for I guess Navajo New Year is the full moon in October, so that's a completely different day. And then I put down like for my husband's people, the Hopis don't kind of disturb the ground or the earth because it's like resting, and that goes with like what Adrian was saying about like winter is a season for pause and reflection. And there's just different like I feel like with winter in the northern hemisphere is more of like let's just rest, collect, and figure out how we're going to move forward into the new cycle of like spring. And there's
Yeah.
also like Lunar New Year, which I think is going to be in February this year. It's the Chinese New Year.
Isn't it going to be Year of the Dragon?
Um, is it Year of the Dragon? I don't know.
I think it is going to be. Yeah.
Let me look
So
that
that's
up
kind of
real
cool.
quick. Um,
Okay. And while you're doing that, I'll share a little bit about the Navajo perspective of things. So I definitely align my life with that. Winter is a time for us to pause and reflect and think about, how the past year um, affected us, what we accomplished, things we might have lost. And for me, it's been a very interesting time because I always take a break during that time naturally to kind of just be with family. Um, but I lost somebody really close to me this year, and it really affected me. It was at the beginning of the month of January, and this was someone who I considered to be like the definition of Natani and Nabahi, someone who was like a true warrior for the people, someone who fought for our rights, who fought to protect the land and the water, someone who was loud about it, demanding justice, demanding accountability, and unapologetic about it, like truly unapologetically indigenous, you know what I mean? And someone I really looked up to greatly because this person was just so fearless and had so much love for the people, so much love in their heart that they would advocate for like our unsheltered relatives. They were the first people to bring mutual aid initiatives to border towns, and this is even before the pandemic. You know what I mean? It was just someone who cared so much about us and our identity and just being authentically who we are, and definitely someone braver than I have ever been. And when they passed away, it broke my heart, and it made me think about what I hadn't done, what I hadn't been brave enough to do or say. And I've always considered myself someone who's been like one to push the boundaries, but there are still some things that I wouldn't do or couldn't do or chose not to do. And in this time of reflection, I've been thinking about how, we only have so much time on this earth to make an impact, and we need to do it. And that's why I'm like, shaking my finger, but doing it in a way that's authentic to who I am, because I am a mother, I am a woman, I am Dinesta, and I do aspire, to walk in the footsteps of Yothga Issa, to follow the path of Nashai Issa, and, to really be one to say, I am a daughter of changing woman. I am a daughter of the sun, My grandfathers are Naya Nizrane and Trobashishchin. You know what I mean? Like, just really own it because there's so much love in that, and it really starts with who we are as people and our identity and how we treat each other and how we choose to live our lives. And so, like, I think that's for me this time of reflection has incorporated all of that, because I think when you lose someone in your life that means a lot to you, someone you respect a lot, it shakes you awake, you know, and and that's kind of what it's done to me. You know, it's really shaken me to my core, and it's really made me think about what I can do differently and what I can do better, and how I can be a better human being, and how I can be that selfless, because it's hard to be selfless. It's hard to give so much of yourself. And that's what I aspire to do, you know.
I thought this was the lighthearted portion of the talk, but
You can take that. Go ahead. Ada, it's all you.
yeah, I'm very sorry for your loss. I saw it on my feeds too of his their passing, and I know you were very close with them, and I was kind of shocked because of their age, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I just wanted to send out my condolences to you. I know you were taking a break from social media, so
Yeah, that's another thing too. I just turned it all off. I couldn't. That's a part of that too. Is just like letting it be, you know, not get caught up in all that nonsense, because it's too much. My heart can't take it. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's not even just me too. It's like so many people that they affected, you know, and it's condolences to like everyone. And it was actually funny because like President Boo Negrin put in he put out a proclamation, like, and it was really funny because like this person was an anarchist, like they were so anti-government. The president sends his condolences, and I just thought it was it was amusing and funny, but also, of course, a nice thing to have that full circle, you know. But it was hilarious. But yeah, thanks, Boo A, for doing that. But it was just funny. Okay, all right. So next thing, what did you find on your little
Oh yeah, so this year
search?
is the year of the dragon. So
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about the circular years in the northern hemisphere?
Oh,
I think that's fascinating.
well, like like people who I think there's a couple of different people who I don't even know if I said a word correct that time, but anyways, like calendars and the way people track time and everything. Some people like a circular